Lady with the boobies, you know, this game, is this going to be a hit or will it be a failure? Today we're going to take a look at all of the aspects of this game, from the marketing to the YouTube search, Google search, even the stock prices, sales of previous games, and talk about the viability of this franchise in 2021. I mean, there is a video game desert at the beginning of this year, and people want to buy games. There she is. She went viral on social media, and she's really pushing the marketing aspects of this game. It goes to show you, if you have one character people can latch onto in marketing, it can really help your game take off. Will this be a hit? Will this be a failure? Are you guys going to be buying Resident Evil Village? All in this episode of the Digital Drop Podcast. Let's pay the bills.
This podcast is sponsored by Restream. Why live stream to one platform when you can simultaneously live stream to every platform to discover new audiences faster using Restream.io?
Okay, let's start off where we actually were before the show when we were talking. Let's head over to this Google Trends and look at this, because it was actually, I was a little surprised to see this, and it kind of hurts my argument moving forward, but that's okay. It actually feels like there has been, or it looks like the data's all there. It looks like there's been a downward trend just for the Resident Evil series. Now that we have a new game coming out, there's actually a couple new games coming out. I'll get into that later. But does this worry you at all, seeing that we're only, a little less than 3 months away from the actual release of May 7th for Resident Evil Village?
Perrin.
It's a bit concerning, but I don't think it's going to affect the launch of this particular game. I think 8 is going to be a bit of an outlier because of its timing during still during a pandemic, and we've been in a bit of a dry spell since November for games. Cyberpunk didn't really deliver on that punch for us, and so we're looking for something good. And right now, this is really capturing, I would say, the imaginations and more of everybody who has been anticipating this title. Now, it's not supposed to come out until May, so we've got a little bit to wait. But Resident Evil 7 did quite well, even though the franchise is declining as a whole. I think their most recent titles have had a nice spike impact on their trend. So what I would expect is a high spike trend, but then it would go back to this kind of slow decline over time. But I think this might be one of their biggest spikes in a while. At least I'm thinking that it will be, based off of the hype that we're seeing so far, the viral marketing, and what we know will happen, the marketing that Capcom will do for this title. They've gotten good at marketing these titles in recent dates, and you can tell by how their sales have worked out for each of the past games. And Ross grabbed this data for us. Where was this from again? Ross, I'm not going to pull it up on screen.
Oh, it's from Fandom's Wiki about the game sales. If you go to Fandom's Wiki and search for Resident Evil, you can see the total number, the total revenue included with inflation of how many units every game in the franchise actually sold.
Okay. So Resident Evil 7 sold 8.3 million units. And before that, they were remakes of Resident Evil 2 and 3. The remake of 2 sold 7.5 million. And the remake of 3 sold 3 million, which is probably their weakest, but it's a remake. And so 7 selling 8.3. It's actually one of the lower total sales in the series, but it had the best launch in terms of sales of all the other Resident Evil games. So Capcom has funneled down its marketing to huge launches to make all their money then up front, but I think it's a total of less sales overall. I think 8 will peak 8.3 at launch, and that's how it's going to win here. And overall, it'll be better than 7. I don't know, AWOL, what do you think here?
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I think that there's a hunger in the market for a great single-player game and a great single-player experience. We were all hoping Cyberpunk 2077 would be that game that scratches the itch, that we could play for a while. We'd be playing with mods. We all thought we'd be cyberpunking it up for like 3 to 6 months and really enjoying maybe one of the best games we've ever had. And unfortunately, that itch was not scratched in the market. Not to mention, Cyberpunk aside, Resident Evil has always been a successful franchise. There's always room for a horror-style game, and they always deliver super high-quality games. And the thing that I'm most excited about for this particular title is the release date pre-summer and without any major competition around it, and how much this game is picking up traction pre-launch. One thing I like to look at are the numbers on the trailers when they drop on YouTube. Are they getting a lot of viral interest on YouTube? Are they getting millions of views per trailer when they drop on YouTube? And what I'm seeing from all of the examples of the trailers on YouTube, it's 2 million views, 3 million views, 1 million views, etc. And that's without advertising. That means that people are super excited about this game. Not to mention, I like to look at sources pre-launch on games like Reddit, obviously Twitter, etc. And you see if the gaming community is picking up on these particular games from a meme standpoint and from a commenting and viral sharing standpoint. And when you see your own friends virally sharing the trailer to you in DMs or in text message or on Discord or whatever, that's also another fantastic sign that games like Resident Evil that aren't multiplayer, that aren't necessarily going to have some massive ongoing marketing budget, have that viral sharing aspect. And the shares are the shares that I've received are, look bro, boobies and stuff like that. And people are just kind of memeing this game and sharing it. And that's doing huge marketing favors to this new Resident Evil title. So I think that the prospects are really good. They're really high. And based on what we're seeing in the trailer, this is something new and fresh and interesting that's going to get the market, that has gotten the market excited on an ancient gaming franchise. Like Resident Evil has been around for years and years and years. How do you keep it fresh? They've managed to do that here with the impressive RE engine and the graphical capabilities of the game, and also introducing this new kind of virally shared character. And it goes without mentioning, I'm going to say it right now. Look, if you put a character in your trailer that has big old boobies, it sells games. It just does. Look at League of Legends, look at all of Blizzard's major games, look at most major games in the past that have relied on organic and viral marketing. They put big old boobies in the marketing. It just works. And you know, you can call that sexist, you can call that insensitive, you can call it whatever it is. But on this show, the Digital Drop Podcast, we focus on facts and we focus on numbers. And the bottom line is, when you put an attractive female in your marketing for your game, it just gets the game more juice pre-launch. And for creators and streamers and YouTubers that are looking to cover this game, that's a very good thing for you. We put that character in our thumbnail, you can put that character in your thumbnail, and it just generates natural interest around the title. Those are my initial thoughts. Perrin, back to you.
Take a look at the financials. Let's take a look and see how Capcom has been doing money-wise over the past year to see if this is in a good spot. So we're looking at the stock ticker on the US markets here for July to now, and it's been a pretty consistent like rise up, actually quite a consistent rise up by, I would say, about 19 points to 34.
Oh my gosh, look
points.
at this, man. These gaming companies are crushing it right now.
They are.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so, yeah, there's a minor dip here in November, I think, because they did not have like anything major to release around the holiday season because they're saving their game for May, or maybe that's just when it's going to be ready. And right now their price is it's on a big high. So I would imagine the viral sharing is helping give investors confidence in Capcom throughout the rest of the winter here, coming into spring. And I think we'll see, we'll shift up and down, and Capcom does have other titles, but I think we'll see this go even higher with the launch there. And I think investors will be pleasantly surprised. We can also
we'll hit the pause button for our audio listeners. What we're talking about is in early July this year, Capcom stock was around $17, and now today, as trading opens today here in January, it's at $34. So it's close to a doubling, if not literally a doubling. I'm bad at math. It's close to that is literally a doubling, actually, of their stock price in 6 months for Capcom. So this bodes very well for them. And one thing you want to be looking at, if a company has a big booming stock price, if they have a lot of confidence from the market, this is going to give the executive team and the marketing teams of these companies confidence to spend money on marketing for upcoming games in the following year, because they want to double down on that growth. They want to double down on that momentum that their company has in the markets and in marketing. And so for creators out there wondering, is Capcom going to put big resources, if they're going to put big money behind the marketing of this new Resident Evil game, this can give you even more confidence looking at these stock numbers, give you even more confidence that they feel good financially right now. And without marketing dollars, there is no buzz about a video game. Perrin?
So to add to this equation really quick, we can look at their financials here too, and they have been getting less and less quarterly revenue over the last year. So in Q1 of 2020, they made $263.2 million. in revenue. In Q2 of last year, 220. So they went from 260 down to 220 the next quarter. And then at Q3, 172 million in that quarter. So they have been getting less overall revenue quarter over quarter in 2020. I think in preparation of this game launching. I think they do have other titles, but this being one of their main flagship franchises, I think building this title up for a 2021 release, I think they're going to be expecting that revenue to increase and be made up at that launch period. I think this also shows that there aren't a lot of pre-orders and pre-sales necessarily for the game. We're not seeing a ton of revenue building up for pre-sales on this one.
Might be now though with this viral marketing and with Booby Lady. So I mean, you never know.
Viral marketing could help solve that. I think that might be their hope. Maybe they're pleasantly surprised there. So they're really, I think, aiming for like sales at launch, for it just to be a big launch. If it can take anything from their last games, that was what happened with Resident Evil 7. They centered their marketing around a big launch and they got the most revenue there. So that will likely be their plan this time. They did well with that last time. Their financials in terms of stock price look good, but their quarterly revenue has been dropping quarter over quarter. So they're really going to be looking to make up ground this May when this game comes out.
Ross.
All right, pull up that trends thing there. Oh, you already did. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to tell you why I think they're going to have the biggest launch that they've ever had in the franchise for this game, but also down the line, I think it's going to crush sales later on down the line, and I'm going to tell you why right now. And keep that up for a second. And this has nothing to do with video games whatsoever. So here's what Resident Evil has coming up on the docket. They have a Resident Evil movie coming out from Constantine Films, a live-action Resident Evil show coming to Netflix. Resident Evil Infinite Darkness anime coming to Netflix. Those are both coming this year. And they also have another unannounced Resident Evil anime. And the Resident Evil 4, arguably the most popular game in the franchise, is getting a complete remake. Now, why does that matter? No, we're talking about TV shows and movies. We're not talking about video games. Well, according to the NPD group who does all the analytics and sales tracking for video games, Witcher 3 saw a 554% increase in physical game sales after the release of the Netflix series. It then went on to break 100,000 concurrents on Steam for the first time ever. So they also had to produce about 500,000 new copies of the book. And this is just because of the Netflix series of The Witcher 3. Now, I know this is true because I was one of them. I tried 3 times to play The Witcher 3 and get into it before the series released, and I couldn't. And then I watched the series and boom, I was automatically into the game. This is going to be a very similar situation where the game comes out first, and then they have all this other new media from movies to live action TV shows coming out later on this year into next year. So what that tells me is they're also going to have a big launch because that's what they're focusing on marketing wise, but it's also going to see some massive sales increase around holiday 2021 when this new anime releases and when this new live action Resident Evil show releases. That's going to bring a lot of new fans over to the Resident Evil gaming franchise, just like it did with Witcher 3. Obviously, Witcher in general is probably a much bigger title, so I don't think we're going to see a 554% increase there, but it will increase. This has been proven to happen time and time again. So yes, I think Resident Evil Village is going to have the biggest launch in the franchise history, and then it's going to, when it's all said and done, in like 3 or 4 years, it will be one of the top 3 selling games in the franchise.
That is a bold prediction. Perrin, what do you think about that? I mean, we're pulling up the chart here. Over time, if you go back to the main Resident Evil trend, it has been dying over time in terms of search interest on YouTube and also on web. So Ross is predicting that this will completely revitalize the entire Resident Evil franchise and potentially send it back the other direction because of this mainstream media coverage and also the series and this supplementary content. Do you see this being the savior of the franchise and bringing back interest?
I do think it could turn around the trend. If they have this much content planned, and they've done other blockbuster movies that have made lots of money off of Resident Evil, but that did not seem to do much to the underlying overall Resident Evil trend. And I think we're seeing that because the blockbuster movies, the Hollywood ones, were far different type of style than what Resident Evil actually is. They were more like action thrillers than horror films. And Resident Evil is very much a horror series, and that is the appeal. If a lot of, and I don't know I don't know as much as you do right now, Ross, about all the extra stuff, but if it's a little bit closer to what Resident Evil's actual general appeal is, at like true horror, then I think we could see an increase. But it's my prediction it'll just be a spike trend, and we're going to go back to this declining trend over time. Even with all the extra stuff, I mean, we're using The Witcher as an example, but the Netflix series of The Witcher was exceptional. It was really, really well done, and it's hard still to find a good fantasy Netflix series that is that good. It's one of the better ones on the platform, and it came at a time right when Game of Thrones had ended, and everybody was really hungry for it because the best fantasy series in the world let us all down, and then here comes The Witcher, and it kind of filled in a nice void. So Resident Evil 8 is filling in a nice void, as we can see. You know, if we look at the individual trend, we can see it's definitely, we're hungry for it now. The question is, long term, does it change the trend? I don't think so. I think Resident Evil continues to decline, but this game spikes it high enough to kind of make it, you know, to bring it back to like a slow decline over time, where it's still better than it was for at least the next year or so. That's my take. It's I think a little bit different for Ross's. Well, does yours deviate in any way there?
I think it ultimately doesn't matter that much because just like with every other single player game, and if you don't mind, pull the gameplay back up in case anybody hasn't seen the new gameplay. With every single player game that has ever come out, it's popular right when it launches. And because a bunch of streamers and a bunch of YouTubers and a bunch of creators cover it, and the media covers it, and IGN and GameSpot and everybody, and then 30 days later, the interest in it decreases by 80 to 90% right after that. It doesn't matter if it has a Netflix show. It doesn't matter if it has any of these other things. Ultimately, if you're a gaming content creator, if you're a streamer, if you're a YouTuber, it's still going to be a spike trend. It is still going to spike up and then die immediately thereafter. And so for you guys, just keep that in mind. Overall, though, if you're looking to build a channel, if you're looking to build a stream, and maybe build a blog, build a podcast about the Resident Evil franchise as a whole, then sure, perhaps this could be a big thing for you. Maybe this could revitalize the franchise and give you content that you can make about Resident Evil that isn't just about the games. You can speculate about the upcoming shows. You can speculate about the upcoming content that's coming out outside of the gaming franchise. And this could make a Resident Evil channel strategy, not just about this game, but an overall channel strategy about Resident Evil viable for YouTubers that want to go after that. That is something that is changing here that I think is super interesting. And there's going to be 2, 3, 4 YouTubers that decide to cover Resident Evil as a franchise now and dedicate an entire channel to it that will potentially become full-time YouTubers because there will be enough interest in it for them to be able to execute that. So that's an idea for any of you out there that love Resident Evil. If you're wanting to make a channel about the franchise itself as a whole, this is probably the one moment in history when you can potentially make that idea viable. Now, Perrin, really quick, we pulled up a moment ago, how many people are actually streaming Resident Evil games at this moment? Because as a streamer, everybody's going to be playing this game. When it comes out, they're going to want to see the jump scares. They're going to want to see their favorite creator go, ah, and they're going to want to be horrified for the first time. But once they see it, they're going to run out of juice on that, obviously. So from a streaming standpoint, how popular do you think this will be in the streaming communities? Also, Ross, what do you guys think about that? Is this going to be short-lived? Is it just going to be a firework that shoots up in the sky and then immediately dies afterwards? Thoughts?
Yeah, it's going to be a spike trend. It's a single player game, and there's no reason why it would not be a spike trend. Pretty much every single player game, such as Resident Evil, every game in that series will be that. It could get some longevity long term, way long term as a speed running game, but that's not going to keep it high on the radar. Here are the initial numbers from the demo, I think, that was streamable on January 21st. And it peaked, I think, at concurrent viewership of around 21,000 or so. Actually, it says 101, so it could be a bit wrong there. But literally, it was only streamable for like 1 day so far, and it's just a small amount of content. So this isn't really giving you a crazy accurate look. It's a very like niche look. Some major creators hit on it. JR West, Avoiding the Puddle, XQCal, Maximilian Dude, like We Love Games. These creators played through the demo, got relatively okay to not very great views. One other thing you can look at, if the game is coming out and nothing has been streamed about it yet, take a look at other games in the franchise. Take a look at the previous title and see how that's been doing. So if we look at Twitch right now, Resident Evil 7, which is the closest predecessor, has 1.5K viewers currently watching it with 1.2 million followers.
Got some speed runners running this thing too to keep the game fresh. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so Resident Evil 7 quickly became a pretty popular speedrunning game. It was done in GDQ in the past years, and it's a pretty entertaining one to watch as well. So you'll see a lot of that keeping the trend alive. And if you look here, like it would be pretty easy to get into the top 10 on this one. I mean, you have to get 10 concurrent viewers or better basically to be in the top 10, and you can maybe get some decent viewership just by streaming the previous title. So it is kind of lucrative to get into the franchise in this way and to prep yourself for the next coming title. The other option you might have is way earlier in the series, and I looked at all of them on Twitch, and the only other one that had consistent viewership that was somewhat decent was Resident Evil 2 at 964 viewers and 200K followers. This one actually would be like a little bit, I think, more difficult to get into the top 10, going this older route. And likely it's speedrunning too. If you look, the top stream is a speedrunner here. So that one as well is you'd have to maybe bring something special to the table. You couldn't just play it normally. So
right. Let's talk about that for a moment. If you want to break through as a streamer in a game like this, that's single player and doesn't really have that much variety, and once you beat the game, that's it. How do you actually break through? How are you going to do it? Let me give you some ideas about what you could do. So it's all about being unique in 2021, and it's also about restreaming. So if you want to maximize your growth, and Ross, if you could share that link in chat, if you're going to be streaming something like Resident Evil games as a whole, as a franchise, you want to be streaming it on every single platform at the same time. You want to be looking at Facebook gaming. You want to be looking at Twitch. You want to be looking at even DLive and Trovo, even Periscope, and get your gameplay out there on as many platforms as possible, and get your stream out there on as many platforms as possible to get as many viewers as you can. And we restream. They sponsor the show, and it helps you maximize your growth. But just streaming this gameplay, like the gameplay you see on the screen, will only have interest in the market for the first 30 days, and then no one will care. So what are you doing after that in order to keep the gameplay interesting, to keep the streams interesting? And so you guys need to be thinking about different concepts here. I'm just going to throw a couple ideas at you if you're looking to cover a single player game. Dressing up in a costume, using a voice changer, potentially modding the games and doing mods content, potentially role-playing as you're playing the game. Doing different challenges where if you lose in particular scenarios, you have to eat a ghost pepper or hot sauce. Doing some sort of crazy twist, playing with your arm tied behind your back, playing where the audience can change the lighting in the background in your studio to scare you. Anytime you scream, you have to take a shot of prune juice or something. Like doing something totally different and interesting and weird and crazy while you're playing something like Resident Evil, where the audience can participate, where you are going to stick out in the stream, and where people will want to watch you stream Resident Evil no matter whether they like Resident Evil or not, no matter whether they watch the game or not. You need to be thinking of what's that unique twist to your content as a streamer and as a YouTuber to get people to pay attention to you. Seriously, costumes would be an easy way to do it. Put you in a costume in the thumbnail, put blood down your face, whatever it may be. You could even do something like, here's another random idea, doing a concept where, every time I'm jump scared, I drink blood. And then you drink this like red juice that you made and it like drips down your face. I'm just thinking of like random crazy ideas that you could do as a streamer to just get people's attention, get them to click, and then get them to have this incredible experience with you on a stream. That's how you can break through in 2021. Just streaming gameplay straight up and thinking that your magnetic personality is going to break through ain't going to work. Back to you, Ross.
So the bold predictions I made a little bit earlier, that's like best case scenario if everything plays out. If the Netflix series and the animes coming out are like top notch, it can really flock people to not only Resident Evil Village, but older games. But I got to be honest about one thing that actually legitimately scares me. And I think at this point, I think it should scare us all, just because what we've been accustomed to so far with these next gen releases has not been pretty. I mean, we can just take Cyberpunk, for instance. We saw what Cyberpunk did to the older gens, the Xbox Ones and your PlayStation 4s. It's essentially unplayable, especially if you got a day one console. So
scarier than any Resident Evil game, the way that gameplay looks.
Quite literally. So if this releases, because I'm assuming, I know they're obviously doing PS5 and Xbox Series X. So if this releases on older gens too, like the Xbox One, if it doesn't hit on these old gens because of the supply of trying to get a new gen console, that just dooms it immediately. Am I off track here? Like if there are bugs and stuff in any relation to, obviously there's a lot deeper problems going on with CD Projekt Red, but if that release is any somewhat similar to what Cyberpunk was, where the old gen was just awful, that pretty much crushes it, right? Like that just ends the conversation right there.
Perrin?
I think the chances of that with Capcom and Resident Evil are super high. I mean, you don't have as high of a scope of ambition with the Resident Evil franchise. It's literally they've made more than 8 of them and they've remade them. They have the formula down. You know, if it were buggy, that would be it would be such a huge deal because it would be so off base for them, because they've released so many of these games and the formula has not changed at all. I mean, the visuals are getting better, yes, you know, but the mechanics are mostly the same. The characters are different, but it's the same single player game formula. So I would really expect them to not mess this up. I mean, it would be a really low chance that they'd mess up launching and be super buggy. In which case, I think they could scramble pretty quickly and fix it with a patch. I think you'll see very good playability on the older gen and really great visuals on the new gen. And that's what most people are going to want to see, is new gen, what it looks like. And I think it's going to look fantastic as they try to show off in the trailer, the gameplay trailer, how great the visual in-game look, how great the environments look. I really don't see them messing it up though. I mean, they've got the formula down at this point. They know what they're doing. They've perfected the art of this. I'm not familiar with how the other launches went, but it sounds like the last Resident Evil went really well. I don't think there were huge stability issues, but I could be wrong about that, so don't quote me on it. So Ross, I don't think you're a Fallout scenario here where the franchise fails because like this game bombs because it's really buggy in the beginning is going to happen. I just don't see it.
I agree, it's rare, but I can't say, well, this is definitely not going to happen, because while, you know, Witcher 3 was definitely bugged at the release, CD Projekt Red was one of the, you know, most highly touted game developers out there, and they completely dropped the ball on this release, kind of out of nowhere. Everybody expected the release of Cyberpunk to be good.
So
I mean, it does scare me.
Do you think COVID will have like changed their workspace environment enough to have caused maybe some slowdown? Maybe it's not ready yet type deal.
Now, see, I didn't even think about that. Now I'm even more worried.
Yeah, I'd say that there's a at least a 30% chance, Ferro, to assign a probability to it, that Resident Evil will have major bugs and have huge problems. Everything you just said a moment ago about Resident Evil and about Capcom and this franchise, I was just saying, if I could turn that into CD Projekt Red, would you be making the same argument before Cyberpunk 2077 came out? And the answer is yes. So sure, they're reliable. Sure, they're repeating the same formula. Sure, it's we have every reason to have confidence. Same thing with CD Projekt Red. And they dropped the ball and they completely effed it up. Everything looked great in the trailers in that game. Everything looked like it was going to be fantastic. All the gameplay looked amazing. Everything looked good marketing-wise. And it turned out it just sucked butts on old-gen consoles. So I am not confident that this game will come out smooth. I hope it does. But I don't think any consumers out there should be pre-ordering this game, in my opinion. You shouldn't be pre-ordering any games anymore, ever, from any developer. If we've seen anything come true in 2019 and 2020, whether it's Blizzard, who used to be perfect essentially as a developer, CD Projekt Red, who used to be perfect as a developer, if it's the Resident Evil franchise, which is essentially a near perfect franchise, it doesn't matter what your credibility is as a developer and publisher. We know that out of nowhere, you can just screw us over as consumers. So I don't like the idea of pre-ordering this game. I like waiting to see actual gameplay on old-gen consoles, extended gameplay on old-gen consoles, and reviewers saying, I put it in my hands, and I played the game myself, and I can confirm it plays well on old-gen consoles. And then at that point, buy it on your PlayStation 4, buy it on your Xbox One, and then actually spend the money on this game. Otherwise, you could be duped once again.
That's
Ross?
a good point.
Yeah. Yeah, that's... Go ahead.
Stop the pre-order. Stop the pre-order.
Stop the pre-order. Yeah.
I think it depends on which console for pre-order. I think I do believe that this game on current gen, which would be a PS5 and Xbox Series X, will be all right. I experienced that with Cyberpunk. It was, while there were still bugs, it's a completely different game on the newer gen. So I don't know. I came in pretty confident about Resident Evil Village and the potential it could have with all the outside contributing factors kind of locking down and maybe propelling it after holiday 2021. I leave this conversation a little more doubtful, to say the least, especially after hearing what Parent had to say about it. So if everything plays out well and this game has a successful launch for both current gen and old gen, and all the Netflix series play out and they're fantastic, they draw a lot of attention to not only the franchise itself, but Resident Evil Village. And then, in the coming years, you got the Resident Evil 4 remake, the best remake, or the best entry in the franchise. I think that's a pretty established opinion. I think that the long-term outlook for this, I see it as this year, maybe after the release of Village, kind of having that downward spike trend. But after the holiday, if everything plays out the way it should, but the way it likely won't, we know how that goes, then I can see a continuous slow growth for the entire franchise, from video games to movies to TV series to everything.
Agreed. Okay, let's go ahead and wrap things up. Final verdict here. And don't hold back whatsoever. Perrin, thumbs up or thumbs down, hit or failure?
It's going to be a hit. It's going to be a huge spike trend. It's going to trend really hard in May when it comes out. Possibly their Capcom's best Resident Evil launch ever. After the 3-month period, though, it's going to dwindle back down. Resident Evil as a total trend will continue to slowly, very slowly decline over time.
Got it. Ross, hit or failure?
It's gonna be a hit. My question now goes on to, how long is this gonna be a hit? Is this gonna be, a single month like we do see with single player games, like you pointed out earlier? Or is it going to be a continuous growth for the entire franchise? I right now am about 55% on the latter happening, and this being a huge move and a huge entry in for the franchise.
I'm gonna say this is going to be a hit. It will be relevant for roughly 14 days, and then no one will care about the game anymore. Thank you so much for watching the Digital Drop Podcast. We appreciate it. We're live almost every single weekday, and we'll see you in the next episode. Don't pre-order this game. Just wait until you see if it looks good from the reviewers. Don't pre-order the game. Don't make that mistake, please.
Pre-order.
Don't pre-order. Thank you so much for watching, and we hope you guys enjoy the Resident Evil franchise. We've got fingers crossed this one's going to be good. Adios, amigos.